There you go. Now you're recording.
All right, and we'll do transcriptions because we believe in doing that. So today we are walking through how to find resources about Down syndrome in another language. And so the first recommendation I usually give people is to go to our understandingdownsyndrome.org page. And if you click on the globe, you can see that we have resources in a number of different languages. So typically when I have these resources translated, it's important to know the process we go through when we do that. We send it through a company that has certified translators that are ATA certified, so American Translation Association. So it's not a machine translation. We don't just put it in a website and have them translate our stuff. We send it to them so that they're actually, they actually have to have some degree of medical background, and we define the medical terms. We send a diction, it's kind of a glossary for the translator. And then the other thing I do when I'm translating into other languages, so let's look at Korean. Okay, I go in here and I don't normally read Korean, so I'm going to have to click on a couple of these to make sure I'm in the right spot to show you something. It'd be cool if I spoke Korean. I think it's this one. It is. Okay. So when I have things translated into another language, we translate all of our text, but this particular page that is the resources about Down syndrome page, I will go into it if it's another language and I'll look for, is there an organization that's in country that I can point these people to that would have even more resources? So for each of these languages, if there's a Down syndrome association in that country where this language is predominantly spoken, I will have a link to that in there. So you can click on that, and then you get to the Down syndrome organization in Korea. So if you're sending a family there and they're looking at our resource, they will also get the links to those in-country organizations that have it written natively. So that's kind of the first, so that's why that's a good first place to send people. And you can even like double check French, which I can read a little bit better than Korean. But you go to resources about Down syndrome, and you can see that I also have resources here from French organizations, Canadian, and specifically Quebec. So in all of those places, they can find resources that are natively written. The reason why that's helpful is because I'm giving them a brief snapshot of what information we want parents to know, new and expectant parents to know. But inevitably, they're also going to want information about breastfeeding and early intervention and all of those things. They wouldn't look for early intervention on here, but more of like the fine motor skills and gross motor skills. So some of the things you learn from them. And so if you click on, the French Down syndrome organization, then you're going to be able to get that more detailed stuff that they're going to want later. So that's why that's a helpful tool. So that's kind of your first thing to do. And I'm going to write all of this out as we're doing it. Check. I'm going to actually send you directly to understandingdownsyndrome.org. And click on globe. Okay. The second thing that I would do is so when she asked about Burmese, I was like, I got to figure out what language or what countries speak that language. So find out which countries speak the language. And so you can tell that when I looked at that, oops, that is not where I wanted to be. Right there. So looking at those languages, you can tell it is Bangladesh, and Myanmar, right? So then the next thing that I'm going to do is I want to find out if there are Down syndrome organizations in those countries, because they're going to have some stuff in that language. So the place that I go to look for that is Down Syndrome International. Down Syndrome International has a list of Down syndrome organizations all over the world. So I'm going to add that to our Word document here, find out which countries speak the language, and then visit Down Syndrome International to find the countries or find the DS words in those countries. Okay. And they have them organized according to regions. So you're going to need to know if it's in Asia or Africa or Europe or, you know, whatever continent it might be. And we know that I actually had to look this up on a globe, so I'm not really that smart. And I realized Bangladesh and Myanmar are right by India. So I came over here and I looked, and sure enough, we have a Down syndrome organization, Down Syndrome Society of Bangladesh. So you've got a website there. You've got an email, so that, and a lot of these people speak English and the other language. So I have had times when this will only have an email and not a website. And I'll send an email to somebody and say, can you please help me?
Yes.
And usually, and a lot of times they can.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Me? Sorry. No, I am lifting up my glasses to read my
Oh,
computer.
okay. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so you've got that, and you've also got a Facebook page.
Yes, I saw that. I Googled that and was able to find that.
Yeah, so here I pulled up the Down Syndrome Society of Bangladesh, and I always appreciate this so much when they've got it in English and in the native language, because then you can kind of navigate and figure out, okay, well, they really do have a lot of resources here. They've got some core programs on awareness, healthcare services.
Wonderful.
And so you can send that to somebody, and they should be able to access it in both languages. Usually they have a little toggle switch to go between the two. You've also got this Facebook page here so Myanmar. So I'm going to go back to DSI. And sorry, I'm having to move around with Zoom too. Oops. I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to look at Myanmar. Now, Myanmar is one of those where it doesn't have a website, but it's got an email and it's got a Facebook page. So you can check out the Myanmar Facebook page, and it looks like they do have some resources here. So I would probably just give the family the Facebook page so they could check that out. And then there's also this Facebook page here for the Down syndrome organization in Bangladesh. And they've got, you know, videos and all kinds of resources. So that's my those are my first two things that I do. My next thing that I do is I Google Burmese and Down syndrome. And that sounds so basic, but what you're really going to have to do though is then curate content. You're gonna have to be a filter for that family. So for reputable sources. And fortunately, when I Googled, let's see, it's over here. When I Googled Burmese, Down syndrome and Burmese, I got this right at the top, Burmese health translations and Down syndrome overview and diagnosis, Burmese. Okay. Well, that sounds like that might be promising. I want to know what the Raising Children Network is. So if there's this video, then I want to check that out. Okay, and I pulled it up right here. And well, that looks pretty professionally developed. That's cool. So I'm hopeful. And so then I Googled Raising Children Network. And Raising Children Network turns out to be so you see, there's a little sleuthing that goes into this. It turns out to be this Australian parenting website that's run by the government. So I'm like, okay, that's pretty legit. I would feel comfortable. So there you go. But what's also cool is, that if it's produced by government, it's translated into Burmese and it's Australian, it's probably in English too, right? So I searched for that, and sure enough, oh, I'm so sorry, that's on her. I did that to her face. That wasn't nice. Stopped at the wrong spot. But it's got these people, this whole video in English. So you can preview it ahead of time and make sure it doesn't say anything that you're like, oh, this is somebody who should not be talking about Down syndrome to people. But,
at conception, there is no fault of anyone. It's whereas an extra chromosome on the 21st chromosome.
Can you all hear that?
One of the things to remember is that the child will have 46 chromosomes that it would have had anyhow. It just has one additional chromosome. So the child is a combination of its parents, like its brothers and sisters.
Okay, so we like her tone. And also she's Lynn Bailey she's the parent support coordinator from the Down syndrome NSW. So that's an Australian Down syndrome organization. So I'm feeling pretty good that they've got somebody from an advocacy organization. Well, and then we've got a a professor who's a director of clinical genetics.
Invariably have a number of features, including certain facial features and have intellectual disability as a result of the effects of having 3 copies of chromosome 21 on the developing brain. About half will have a problem with the heart and the way the heart develops. Some will have.
Okay, so we're feeling feeling pretty good about the tone of how they're talking. I would listen to the whole thing if I were evaluating it, but I'm, doing this to show you all. But they've got a mother on there. That's great. Sharing her experience. And let's see, I think this is probably another, do they tell us who she is? Yeah, we've got a couple of moms. So this looks really promising. And then we've got this translated into Burmese. And
chromosome အပုံတစ်ခုပါလာဖြစ်ရတာပါကျမတို့သိဖို့ကကလေးမှာ chromosome.
Now the other thing that I'm looking for is that we've gotten feedback over the years that sometimes if you're dealing with the immigrant population in the US, that the language changes very fast. And a lot of you are going to be serving immigrant populations as opposed to people in country. And the cool thing about finding this on the Australian website is that they are also serving an immigrant population, and videos tend to work better, the feedback we've gotten, because they're able to deal with the spoken language and you're not having to deal with what might be some literacy issues. So all around, to me, as I'm searching through these different pieces, what I would end up sending to Erin is this video. I think this video is very well done. And I would send you the link to the Down syndrome organization in Bangladesh and also the Facebook page for the Down syndrome organization in Myanmar. And so then you're able to give that family some really solid resources to look at. So that's kind of how I walk through that process.
Great.
So I'd love to hear any questions or thoughts about that.
I'm so excited this took like 10 minutes. I mean, it's incredible, the information that's available at our fingertips. This is so helpful. And general, like this can be used for so many different immigrant populations that we encounter. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it's very cool. We have access to so much information. The real challenge is trying to filter through what's helpful and what's not, Heather, I see that you had, okay. Yes, Myanmar was formerly Burma and then NSW New South Wales. Very good. Heather, I know that you have done this a ton for families over the years. So if you have any insights to share about other tips and tricks that I have missed, I would love to hear what you do.
Well, I'm not sure that I have more than what you've already done practically, but one of the things that was pointed out to me by one of my foreign-born parents was that if we can get the language most commonly spoken by the people isn't always the government sanctioned language, right? So my parent from Estonia would be thrilled if there was anything there in Estonian, although of course everybody in Estonia speaks Russian just fine. Russian happens to be the language of the captors. That's the way we described it, the language of the captors. It would be more culturally accepted if they could get it in that more heart language rather than the government sanctioned thing. Right?
Yes, and I would add too that it's important to understand different cultural sensitivities when you are providing these resources. So for example, Portuguese and Spanish have a lot of similarities, but Portuguese people do not like it when you send them Spanish.
And don't send the Spanish they speak in Madrid is not the Spanish they're speaking in Honduras.
Yeah.
So do not send anything translated by your Guatemalan friends to your new Spanish parent. So yeah, it's difficult that way.
Yes, and Jen, I see that you're asking about the Word doc. I am actually going to publish that as a blog post with the link to this video. So then that way I'll send it to you and you can all have it that way. And it's available for anyone who wants it. I'll try to get that done pretty soon after this call. I have one more meeting after this call and then I'll get that done and send it out. But I would say too, as far as cultural sensitivity, to make sure that, like you said, like you're using, well, one, don't use machine translations if at all possible, because you can end up accidentally saying offensive things that you don't mean to. And like we never, it is our organizational policy. We do not use machine translations for any of our resources, and be careful of that with places you're looking to. There are certain, entities that will say they've got it in different languages, but it's clearly a machine translation because they'll have like a flag and have a gajillion different languages. And you're like, could you really do that many? Or is that, usually that's an indication of a machine translation if there's just like dozens. The other thing is, so you would want to try to find a resource that's not that way, unless you're just desperate. I mean, if you're absolutely desperate and there's a family that you can't find anything else by looking through some of these using these more reputable sources, then, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. But ideally, try to avoid machine translations or resources that use them. I also think it's really, really helpful if, as an organization, you keep a spreadsheet, database, whatever, of other family members or of other members of your organization who speak different languages and are willing to either provide just kind of translation or just support for those families. Because, if you've got a high Somalian population, make sure you have one of them trained to be a new or expectant parent support person. And you want to provide them with training too. But it's really important to make sure that you have people they can talk to. So
I can tell you that it's been very difficult to not have that. We used to have that in our previous database CMS program, and now we don't require that information when people register as new members. And so I'm like really losing a lot by not having that information.
Yeah, so if you're currently in the midst of, I think that's a really good point, Heather, if you're currently in the midst of setting up a CMS or you're you have some kind of survey that you do, you might want to add on there, what other languages do you speak? Or that you would be, and if you would be comfortable if new and expectant parents contacted you. Because you definitely want to be able to provide that as much as possible. So those are some other keys. Any other thoughts or questions? Like counting in my head because I'm trying to allow for more silence or time for people to unmute if they need it, but it doesn't seem like anyone else had anything that they wanted to say. But anyway, this is basically the process that I follow to do that. I'm gonna stop recording now because I want to just keep that.